This is Tiger Ascari. Thanks for coming back. Me and my girlfriend just the other day were talking about kids and marriage and all that good stuff, which I fully intend on doing. Uh, I truly believe that as a Christian, we should be getting married. Um, we should be having children, and we should be raising those children in a two-parent household. Um, But the one thing that definitely kind of really like stays in my mind is raising children in this new type of world. We're in a world where, I mean, God, I've heard stories of you have places here, well, not here, um, but you have places out there where you have children in elementary school claiming they're trans. You have girls that are underage that find their way posting on OnlyFans, all these kids using social media and especially being black, a lot of the hyper violence that occurs in the black community are young black teenagers. Where it's like, okay, if they shoot somebody, it's a little harder to try them as an adult if they're 13, 14 years old. And that definitely kind of, it's not scary, but it's definitely something more to think about. Is like, how do I raise kids in an environment where you can keep them from those things, but at the same time not being like a helicopter parent. I definitely don't want to do that. Looking back in my life, both of my parents immigrated here to Florida, the United States to Florida from Jamaica. Um, and just being black, being raised by both of your parents in a married household is a rarity in itself, and I I would say a privilege. And the life that my parents afforded me was a pretty middle of the road, middle class lifestyle. Lived in the suburbs, went to school. I played Xbox. I played outside, and then played video games. And I never, I was kind of a nerd in school. I watched anime. I read fantasy books. Stories, this, that, and the third. And I never really had the kind of propensity of just being like, oh, like I'm gonna join a gang, or I'm gonna do some criminal some criminal BS. Like I never really had that in my mind. I mean, when I was in school, I'd be bullied and called an Oreo, black on the outside, white on the inside, and I used to hate that, but I didn't have the low self esteem to the point to where I felt like I had to act out and then be like, oh, okay, well, let me, start sagging my pants and start speaking improper English and start just like being hyper emotional and violent towards people that have any type of little slight towards me. Yeah, let's do that. That's just a total winning strategy. Um, and I think from a young age, I realized that those types of young black men were the types that would just be in this perpetual cycle of just misery, of antisocial behavior, and just being on the edge of society, on the edge of the law. And I never wanted to be that type of person. I think in the black community, there's a massive, massive, massive underdiagnosis of mental illness, especially in some communities where there's a lot of violence occurring, like PTSD, for example, assaults, this, that, and the third, children being victimized. I think about all these things, and I want to convert to Orthodoxy. My girlfriend's Catholic, um, but we both agreed that our kids are going to grow up in a more or less a Christian household. If we could afford it, maybe send them to like a Christian private school. Uh, but even beyond that, there's so many more avenues for the world to like impress upon your children. And there are even some people out there that make the suggestion, typically those on the left of the political spectrum, that, excuse me, that don't believe that your children are yours, that it takes a village to raise a child, which in a sense I can agree with, but not in the sense that they're in places in Europe where if you don't believe, if your child starts coming out as transgender, and if you don't believe that, then you can lose your child to the state, and God knows what would happen after that, which sounds absolutely demonic. Thankfully we live here in Florida where something like that wouldn't occur, or at least I'd hope not. But there are so many different avenues in which society can come and impress upon your child, impress upon your family. I think what builds strong societies are strong families with a man and a woman in the household having and raising children. But it's just the stress of having the children, raising them. I don't even think, because nowadays you're talking about like the birth rate crisis and this and all this stuff. And a lot of people will first complain that, okay, well, it's too expensive to raise a child. Yes and no. You would be surprised, looking at everything. I don't think it's that expensive to raise a child. Um, I think it's expensive to raise a child in the way that people would want to, because people don't even believe in the system that they vote for locally, even including people on the left. People on the left typically don't have children, and they create these environments that make it like almost radioactive to have children in, but then they complain about everything being expensive, higher taxation, more immigration, stressing out public services, the public school system, etc. While on the right, people believe in typically, hey, you should get married, hey, you should have children, within a Christian context. And that's something I can jive with a little bit more. Like I said, we're never dooming over here. Never doomer 2026. We're never dooming over here. Because one day the baby boomers, they won't be here anymore. One day the Gen X won't be here anymore. I'm a millennial. I'm 33. I'm a millennial. We're going to be the ones that are going to be in charge of and taking care of the world and stewarding the world. And a lot of the reason why people hate baby boomers so much, especially my generation, is they feel like baby boomers created this society that only benefits them. And they came up in a society that benefited them, and then they kept voting for things that only benefited them, like Medicare, Social Security, these things that are already bankrupted our country. And by the time I get to 65, which is the current retirement age, am I going to be able to reap those benefits? Maybe. I don't know. That's why I'm trying to work my way to have a pension, to have benefits, and have children and raise those children. I think if baby boomers did a better job of not just raising but supporting their children, I think a lot of people would probably be having children more. But that just goes to show it's just like, well, baby boomers would say, oh, millennials and Gen Z, we're lazy, we're this and that. It's like, well, who raised us? Who raised us? Now, I mean, my parents, I would say they raised me pretty well. I'm a pretty well-adjusted individual, but in a lot of other cases, not so much. So it's like, you want to say that the younger generation is this, that, and the third. Well, who raised them? And that's the mentality that I want to have when going into raising my kids. I want to raise children that are better than me in every way, that are more capable, that are going to be more physically fit, that are that have higher aspirations for themselves than I ever did for myself. And I think in general, if people go into parenthood like that, and being a parent and being there for their children in every facet of their lives, including after they turn 18. When my kids turn 18, I'm not going to force them out of the house. I'm going to try to give my kids every single advantage that they have, mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, every single advantage that I can afford to give my child. I'm going to go for it. But at the same time, holding them accountable, keeping them humble, keeping them social. It's and also spending time with them, not just having them on a video game all the time. Like, no, let's go outside and let's walk in the park. Let's Um, let's travel. I want to take my kids traveling. I want to take them around the world when they're young to kind of see different perspectives and different languages and different cultures, especially being black. I want my kids to be better than me in every single way possible. And dare I say it, I want my kids to be better than your kids. They don't have to be richer. They don't have to be more physically fit, but I would say I would want them to be good moral people that they can in turn go and raise their children of their own and pass that down to. I want to raise kids that I can pass things down to and keep the lineage going. And I pray to God that they definitely don't end up being some vindictive, envious communists. Never that. Keeping them humble, keeping them capable, and not taking things for granted and appreciating things that they have and not envious of the things that they don't. That's what I'm going to go for. That's all I have for right now. Peace out.